Our next speaker, Dr. Jennifer McCall, is the CEO of CTOX Research and a lecturer at UNCW. This year, her firm received a $1.5 million grant to further develop toxin tests for seafood. She's on the leading edge of our region's potential to become a center for marine biotech businesses. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer to the stage.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here to talk about what I think the potential is for marine science in our area. When we started CTOX, our goal was to create simple and easy-to-use tests for regulatory agencies to protect the commercial seafood supply. From marine toxins that are naturally occurring, they get in the seafood, and when you eat them, you get sick. And so our vision is that this will be used by regulatory people to protect public health being a passion of mine, given my other day job is as a lecturer or assistant professor in the UNCW College of Health and Human Services. It's odd when I say I'm a marine scientist, people tend to ask me if I do this. They say, I love dolphins and manatees and sea turtles. And I explain, well, you know, I don't really get to interact with these creatures. I'm not that type of marine scientist, so they at least then expect that I dive, which I haven't done, don't really know how to do, and see amazing fish. A few years ago, you may have seen the memes that made the round on social media of careers and the common misconceptions that come with these careers. And I really like this one for me, because this is what most people think I do, swimming with dolphins, and sure that my mother thinks I'm out there boycotting things. But what I actually do, and what most marine scientists actually do, is spend a lot of time around a computer, because science is nothing without data. And so we're locked in a computer. And my life is even less glorious than that, in that what I actually do is look at goo. And a probably better term for this would be harmful algae or marine algae. And what I do is I collect samples and culture the samples, and I use analytical instrumentation to grind it up and see what's inside of it. And I do this for a couple of reasons. The first is for bioassay development, which is a fancy term for creating those tests that people can use to look for marine toxins and make sure seafood is safe. But the other thing I use it for is to look for natural product drug discovery. Natural products is a fancy term that pretty much just means a potential therapeutic from a natural source. And this picture here on the, I don't have a laser pointer, but there at the end, is somebody in a tissue culture hood looking for bioactivity of a natural product. Here's an example of one. For about 2,400 years or so, people have been brewing tea from willow bark and leaves, and for use as a pain remedy. And in about the 19th century, some chemists were able to isolate this compound, this natural product. They modified it because we scientists, we always think we can make things better. And they created acyl salicylic acid. Bayer marketed this as aspirin. This is one of the, it's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines for a healthcare system. And over 100 billion pills are consumed each year by this for pain, because it's safe and it's easy to get. Here's another story. This guy is Alexander Fleming. He's a brilliant scientist, but he's a mess. And he would look at, his research involved looking at Staphylococcus bacteria. It's an infectious pathogen. Maybe you guys have heard of MRSA. It's the same type of bacteria. So he was investigating Staphylococcus bacteria, and he decided, the story goes, he put his plates, this little round agar dish with bacteria growing on it, put it on the shelf, went on vacation, left a window open, and he came back, and it was contaminated with mold. And the difference between a mistake and an innovation is when you look at this, do you say, oh, this is trash, and throw it out, or do you go, that's interesting? He went, that's interesting. And he found that the bacteria that was not near the mold still grew. But as it got closer to the mold, there was a zone of death where the mold was able to kill the bacteria. And so he thought, that's interesting. and he did some chemical analysis, and he was able to pull out this structure. You guys know this is penicillin. This is 1928. And when World War II came along, penicillin saved countless lives of US and British troops. He also noticed, though, and we knew this long ago, he warned about if you use too much of it or you don't completely kill off the bacteria are able to develop resistance. And so he was very cautious about the overuse of penicillin. But we didn't listen. More on that later. Most, if not all, the antibiotics that we have today come from the soil. You can think of the soil as the English versus the French over the past 1,000 years or so, until recently, where it's a battleground. Bacteria versus bacteria, bacteria versus fungi, fighting it out for resources. The 100 Years' War, English versus the French, warfare drove innovation. And so we saw innovations like the longbow. It's very similar with bacteria and with fungi in the backyard. They create chemical compounds to fight off the other people and to be better able to get resources. And so scientists, after the discovery of penicillin, would go around all over in their backyards. They would go anywhere around the world, find soil samples, bring them back to the lab, and see what's in them, and look for bioactivity of natural products. The problem is that we've overused these. So this picture shows two different plates of the same type of bacteria, and each round white disc holds some antibiotic. And you can see the little circles, little zones of death, as it spreads out on the plate on the left. The plate on the right, the bacteria has developed resistance. The World Health Organization calls this a global crisis. We are rapidly reaching the point where we will have infectious diseases we have not seen for 100 years, but we've been able to treat, that are no longer able to be treated. Tuberculosis. There are XDR, exclusively drug-resistant tuberculosis strains that are killing people. There is no cure. There are strains of gonorrhea that came out in England a couple years ago that all of the current first lines of medications don't touch it. MRSA, if you get MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. If you get that, it's a skin infection. It's particularly nasty. Sometimes you have to go to the hospital and get an IV injection of vancomycin, which it's like a chemotherapeutic. It does not make you feel well. And it's a race. What are you going to kill first, the bacteria or the person? There are strains of MRSA that are now vancomycin resistant. Compounding this problem is that we have reached an antibiotic discovery void. There is a 20 to 40 year period, depending on who you listen to. This is a World Health Organization graph, which isn't showing up right. 20 to 40 year gap in new classes of antibiotics. We have not kept up with discoveries. We can't find new ones. Now, this was broken in 2010. About 4 new ones came out. One was linezolid, which actually does treat tuberculosis, so that was a good innovation that came out. But we're still, the World Health Organization has said, we are not keeping up with the pace of antibiotic resistance. They are able to develop it faster than we are able to find new antibiotics. So what can we do? I told you that all the antibiotics, or most of them that we have come from the backyard. But we're in Wilmington, and we have a different backyard. Recently, this story came out that found an antibacterial compound in ocean bacteria. The ocean is just the same battleground as your backyard soil is, but we haven't looked at it. We haven't tapped into it. We haven't ground up what organisms are there and looked for bioactivity, but we're starting to. And that's one of the things that I'm starting to do. I like my version of fungi, which is that little guy up there in the corner. It's algae. And algae, single-celled algae, is also going through a battle with bacteria. And they produce compounds that are able to limit bacterial growth. And so there are 100 million times more bacteria in the ocean than we have known stars. So we can start looking at this and finding new compounds. It's not going to prevent bacteria from developing resistance. But if we can find new classes of antibiotics And if we can limit the spread of resistance, doing things that we know that we can do, like not overprescribing it, not putting it in our food, making sure we finish a course of antibiotics. So I liked what you said about throw out your codeine, throw out your antibiotics if you haven't eaten them, and if you have, make sure you finish them when you get a prescription. Then maybe we can meet the demand, because we are very, very quickly facing a dark age again, where you'll get an infection and it can't be treated. So what does this mean for us? We have incredible resources here in Wilmington. We have oceans, and we have our UNCW, which has a phenomenal marine science and marine biology programs. We have support initiatives here in Wilmington. I started here. I started my company here as a marine biotech company looking to capitalize and commercialize marine resources, bioassay development, and marine natural products. And one of my favorite stories is this picture in the middle. She's a UNCW student. Our students want to stay here. Our students want to start companies here, and we have the resources for it. And she graduated this year, 2017, and she just won a Young Social Entrepreneur Award for her test that she developed. It's called Fecal Finders, and it looks for human waste in water, which is particularly interesting considering last weekend we had a giant dump of, 70,000 gallons of sewage at Wrightsville Beach. Her test can look for that and see if you have contamination in your water, in your drinking water, in your beach water. And so what we need to do is make sure that we have our support systems in place to nurture students like her, people coming out of the university, people in our region that want to start marine biotech-related businesses, so that we can see this as a success for our region. Thank you.